Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first of a series of webinars that the Chair for the Responsible Development of the Metaverse is organizing for this second half of 2023. My name is Aurelio López. I'm acting as Director of the Chair. In this first webinar of this second part of the year, we are going to talk about data protection in virtual worlds. This is the third action line of the Chair. And as you may remember, in the middle of the summer, the European Commission issued a strategy on virtual worlds and established that the existing legal framework on data protection applies in the metaverse. However, we asked two scholars to analyze whether that statement is correct or not. I'm referring to Pablo Trigo and Vagelis PAPAKONSTANTINOU, who are working on a research paper sponsored by the Chair entitled Personal Data Processing within Immersive Virtual Worlds, Compliance Challenges of the GDPR. Pablo Trigo is Senior Researcher at Vrije Universiteit Brussel and member of the LSTS Research Group, and Vagelis is professor at the same university, member of the research group, and also member of the scientific committee of the Church. They will present the preliminary conclusion of this paper, and later on they will receive comments from Eleni Kosta, full professor in technology and human rights at Tilburg University, and Gianclaudio Malgieri, associate professor of technology and law at Leiden University and co-director of the Brussels Privacy Hub. Thank you very much to all of you for participating in this activity of the Chair. And without anything else to mention, I give the floor to Pablo and Vagelis. Please, guys, go ahead.
Thank you, dear Aurelio. Thank you very much. I'll just start from my side with only a couple of minutes, and then Pablo will actually make the presentation. From my part, I just want to express thankfulness for being here, for your invitation also to LSTS to be present in this project, in this chair. This is how I participate also in the scientific committee as representative of LSTS. This is a very interesting and timely project, and us being involved in the privacy and data protection challenges of this part has been a blessing, of course, because it is extremely interesting and topical. However, I would not go as far as say a curse, but quite difficult because of the many aspects that are out there to discuss, and we try to do our best including them in our working paper, and I hope for fruitful discussion to follow. Now the floor is passes to Pablo.
Okay.
To actually make the presentation.
Thank you very much, Vagelis. Can you see the presentation? The slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Well, we are working this paper that is trying to assess and analyze the privacy challenges in the interconnected data-driven metaverse. And the proposal is trying to study the most significant privacy challenges that need attention in this environment. Addressing these challenges is crucial to developing trustworthy and secure virtual ecosystems. And our presentation is structured in five major points.
Pablo.
Yes.
Excuse me, can you put the presentation in full screen?
Okay, can you see it? Great.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, thanks a lot.
Yes. Well, it's structuring five major points: the metaverse, virtual world concept, and main features. We're trying to present these categories, the different aspects of the very notion of the metaverse. Then we're going to delve into the current state of the metaverse. Then the data processing operations that are taking place in the metaverse. We're going to present some kind of taxonomy regarding this kind of data processing activities that is processed in these environments. Then we are going to delve into the personal data protection issues in the metaverse. And finally, we are going to test the most important part probably of this presentation. And then we are going to try to present this approach, this privacy by design and by default approach that should be present when designing and using this kind of environments. I have some, let's see, probably my presentation, I don't know why. Let me check. Give me a second. Can you say, okay. Excuse me, I have some issues. I cannot. You can see the presentation, but okay, because I cannot see the presentation on my screen. I can, if a problem is I present my the presentation this way using Aurelio.
It's okay, Pablo, if it makes it easier for you to.
Yeah,
because the problem you have is that you cannot pass from one slide to the other,
yes,
right?
thank you very much. Okay, this is then we're going to delve into the first aspect, the concept and the main features of the metaverse. The metaverse, although the notion of the metaverse does not have a uniform meaning, and it exists a lot of definitions available, it can be understood in simple terms as a computer-based environment built entirely online and shared by individuals, being a representation of a world with specific characteristics in which users interact through representation of themselves, called avatars. I mean, users commonly engage with metaverses by creating and using one or more avatars or virtual personas. And in this context, avatar serves as a means for individuals to shape many aspects of their identities. This encompasses the ability for people to project themselves and decide how they want to be recognized in the metaverse, which is closely intertwined with the right to private life and the protection of the personal data. Metaverses are defined by three essential features. First, persistence and real-time functionality. Second, immersive user experiences. And third, its comprehensivity. And moreover, it possesses four specific technical attributes. So first, realism. This feature enables individuals to immerse themselves in the virtual world, creating a deep connection with this environment. Second, the ubiquity. This means that the virtual spaces should be easily accessible across different digital devices. Third, interoperability, that fosters a more interconnected metaverse experience. And scalability, that it's related to the network architecture's capacity to accommodate a large number of users. It ensures that the metaverse can grow and adapt to new demands. Well, regarding the current state of the metaverse, the metaverse has undergone a significant improvements in autonomy, capacity, and functionality in recent years. For example, regarding virtual reality, augmented reality, and extended reality technologies, infrastructure, high-speed global connectivity, and rendering devices with powerful computing capacities for generating virtual spaces. Additionally, we must consider the introduction of new applications, smart devices, wearables that are pivotal in creating hyper-real virtual experiences. On the other hand, organizations are now beginning to explore the potential of the metaverse and its possible integration into their business models. Two modalities have emerged in virtual worlds: centralized and decentralized. These models show significant differences in how metaverse ecosystems are developed and managed, offering also the possibility of hybrid combinations. Two modalities have, for the first modality, the centralizing metaverse model, is characterized by the fact that one of few or a few entities maintain significant control over the system's infrastructure, process, and data processing in general. This entity oversees the entire ecosystem, determining rules, policies, and governance. On the other hand, the decentralized metaverse model adopts a distributed approach by dispersing control among a network of nodes and stakeholders. It's based in some way on peer-to-peer direct interactions and frequently in blockchain technologies. Okay, regarding the data processing operation in the metaverse, we were trying to see a taxonomy of this data processing activities and the different types of data that are processed in metaverse context. The collection of data, personal and non-personal, has emerged as a crucial component of these virtual spaces that accumulate, store, and exchange massive volumes of data every second. As users engage with digital worlds, they interact. Their interactions generate a wealth of information. In this sense, the metaverse relies on extensive collection, creation, and analysis of information to fuel its growth and operation. This includes a wide range of personal data, even facial expression, gestures, and body language. The data-centric nature of the metaverse, again, a landscape where wearable tech, smart devices, and platforms intersect, presents unique privacy challenges, including deeper profiling and constant monitoring. This diversity exceeds what we typically encounter in traditional online environments. The data processed in virtual worlds can be categorized in this sense into three primary groups: declared data, observed data, and inferred data. First, declared data that represent information that users consciously share while interacting in the metaverse. And this category encompasses, for example, user profiles. Well, during account creation or customization, users may indicate their interests, hobbies, and other preferences, and other personal details such as biographical data and profile pictures. And second, observed data. That this means the information that arises from users' actions, interactions, and behaviors within the metaverse. And observed data involves a wide range of data points. For example, users' interactions within the virtual world, which includes the place they visit, the objects they interact with, sensory data. That means data stemming from an individual's sensory experiences and perceptions, including, for example, visual data, audio data, and tactile data. These data points also includes recording, for example, body language, such as eye movements, facial expression, gestures, and so on. Data from users' conversations and messages are all part of this kind of data categories, location tracking, and virtual transactions. Finally, inferred data. It involves making data-driven assumptions about the individual's preferences and behaviors. Some key elements, applications of inferred data include, for example, preference of interest, recommendations, and targeted advertising. We can see that in some way the metaverse can exacerbate the existing challenges of accumulation of data. The key features of metaverses can exacerbate this if we keep in mind, for example, that all technologies that make up the metaverse environment have their own privacy risks that need to be managed. But in addition, the joint application of all these technologies can lead or create a new risks to rights and freedoms on a scale that's difficult to assess. Then the data landscape within the metaverse presents a significant challenge to fundamental data protection principles. For example, the metaverse continuous operation and data processing put the principle of proposed limitation to the test of them, as it's often complex to clearly define the reason why data is collected. Data minimization is also challenging, especially when considering the different kinds of data processed in this environment, including sensitive categories like physiological and biometric information. We're going to address these different aspects in great depth. First data protection challenge is the fact that these metaverses are present this feature of intensive data collection and detailed profiling. We already mentioned that the metaverse is characterized by extensive data collection practices, which could involve real-time monitoring, analysis of user interactions, and preferences. It also be noted that metaverse immersion has the effect of reducing the user's ability and perception to make decisions, avoiding the collection of and processing of personal data. Furthermore, integrating artificial intelligence and automated decision-making systems within different virtual space experiences introduce new data analysis possibilities. Combining different data types, declare, observe, and infer personal information can uncover specific personal attributes and interactions, and this allows for a level of knowledge and profiling of individuals that surpasses what was previously possible in other digital networks. Building upon the earlier point, the wealth of data available within virtual environments allows advertisers to craft highly personalized and at times invasive ads inside the metaverse. A second challenge is the identity authentication and anonymity issues. As you know, in virtual spaces, it can exist diverse identity requirements across different platforms, and this can introduce considerable challenge and risk for users. These issues range from threats of identity theft to online harassment, and this situation can it can discourage people who want to customize their online presence with some degree of anonymity or pseudo-anonymity. Additionally, avatars could be traced back to individuals' real identities, especially when the process of creating these virtual personas requires the provision of personal information. We must consider that even a small amount of digital footprints can be enough to identify a user within metaverses. In this context, regarding avatars as online representation of specific users, it's important to recognize that the best avatars possess pseudo-anonymized information characteristics, and this means that they could disclose information about real-life identity of users. Well, regarding issues, a topic of data consent, transparency, and control. Well, in virtual spaces, the lack of adequate transparency regarding data collection, use, and sharing gives rise to a complex issues regarding the lawful processing of data, obtaining informed consent, and exercising data control. In general, within digital environments, simplifying and improving transparency in data use terms are not commonplace, and the process of getting user consent and providing precise data control settings is often concealed within lengthy terms of service and complicated privacy policies. Extensive data collection raises concerns about transparency, as end users are often not properly informed, obtaining freely given specific and ambiguous consent very challenging. And this issue becomes even more challenging in metaverse settings where multiple parties control data, making it difficult to obtain informed consent from users. To assess the legality of consent, it's crucial to determine whether a significant power imbalance exists between users, the data subjects, and metaverse stakeholders, data controllers. In this context, concepts like, for example, market power and market dominance become relevant. Metaverse stakeholders, monopolistic or even oligopolistic position significantly influence the validity of data subjects' consent. Furthermore, exploring other legal grounds for processing personal data in virtual spaces is crucial. For instance, the role of the performance of a contract. Here, it's necessary to consider the contractual necessity and a fair assessment of the contractual terms. Regarding data localization and data regulation, virtual scope in virtual worlds, we can say that the decentralized nature and global accessibility of metaverses create a challenge in identifying the applicable legal framework as they cross international borders and lack tailored regulations. A critical consideration here is the fragmented legal landscape concerning data protection and privacy. This issue can introduce substantial issues, particularly in virtual environments that mainly adhere to the legal regulations of the operator of developer's home country. We can see this, for example, that many metaverse platforms are based in the United States, and probably when they designed the system, the platform, the structure, they consider the American legal landscape, and they are not considering other privacy and data protection regulatory frameworks. Often, these environments overlook the data protection laws that may be relevant in regions and countries where the services are accessible or directly offered. The application of data protection laws depends on the geographical location of the end users, and limitations on choice of law terms or agreements, and potential litigation complexities further adds to the regulatory challenge in the metaverse. Regarding responsibility and accountability, the large and continuously growing number of entities operating and interacting within the metaverse create a network of complex relationships. In very simple terms, data controllers typically include the following parties. First, metaverse platform operator or administrator. This is a pivotal figure in the metaverse landscape, as it holds considerable influence over the metaverse architecture, policies, and user experience. It is responsible for designing, overseeing, and nurturing the virtual environment where users interact and engage. Then, metaverse service providers offer different services within the metaverse, such as social interaction tools, e-commerce, and content hosting. They collect and process user data for specific services. Third-party developers are also a very important actor here. They create applications, games, or experience within the metaverse, and they also process users' personal data. And in some cases, users can also act as a data controller. This occurs when users create content, interact with others, or manage personal data within the metaverse. The role and responsibilities of each party can vary depending on the jurisdiction and the contractual terms applicable to a particular metaverse. For example, in a centralized virtual space, the platform operator typically has more control and bears more extensive responsibility for data processing activities. Conversely, the allocation of responsibility tends to be more distributed in a centralized environment. Related with the previous point, cross-platform data sharing and joint controllership is a very important aspect. A virtual world form a complex web of diverse organizations and relationships, each with interchangeable roles, responsibility, and liabilities, and consequently identifying entities falling under the categories of joint controller or sub-processors becomes a challenging endeavor in these spaces. Then users, for example, may face some problems when attempting to hold any party accountable for uses related to the processing of their data. Well, interoperability and portability. Although the metaverse is commonly portrayed as a singular concept, it's more likely to consist of multiple virtual worlds, each created by different platform providers. In this context, interoperability relates to the capability of different virtual spaces, systems, or platforms to interact and function adequately. Here, data portability stands as a crucial element and enhances the user's experience. It empowers users to access, reuse, and transfer their data across different platforms and services, fostering transparency and some way a user-centric environment. To attain these goals, it's crucial to adopt and put into action, for example, shared technical standards. This is crucial to prevent a problem known as vendor lock-in. where you're overly dependent on a single provider. Another very important considerations here is the security challenges. The security aspects in the metaverse depend on multiple factors, including the chosen platform, centralized or decentralized, the nature of processing activities, and the interconnect devices in use. In this sense, depending solely on the hardware or software security of an individual metaverse component or tool is insufficient to guarantee data protection during the transfer of data between devices or systems. Hence, the importance of ensuring the security of both the infrastructure and the network is clear. This could be achieved through a comprehensive or holistic approach, incorporating, let's say, a security by design framework. Finally, well, this is a crucial or very important element when dealing with data protection issues in the metaverse is the exercise of data subject rights in this immersive digital world. As users traverse these virtual environments, they may encounter a dynamic interplay of regulatory frameworks, each with distinct different requirements, substantive and procedural. Including, for example, specific data subject rights, the condition for their exercise, and the availability of some legal or administrative remedies. Users worldwide can interact within the same virtual environment, creating a jurisdictional title in this way, and determining which data protection law apply to each user or to each specific case, and which authorities are responsible for enforcement in a particular case can be very complex. We need to consider also that pseudonyms and avatars make it challenging to link virtual personas to real-world identities, and these can, in some way, hinder the precise identification and proper response to GDPR data subject requests. And this is some kind of a paradox when dealing with this kind of issues. Moreover, decentralized metaverses and distributed ledger systems, given their features and governance design, make it challenging for users to exercise their rights, such as accessing their data or requesting its erasure. Well, finally, how to deal with all these issues? Well, our intuition, we think that considering that metaverses are data-driven and data-centric fabrics, there are fabrics in the sense of considering, you know, in the lagging frames and systems that organize and give meaning to the metaverse. It's necessary to adopt a structuralist perspective. And given this, and adopting this structural approach, we need to consider it's necessary when designing the system to consider the long-term implications of the design choice, embedding data protection considerations from the very beginning of a system planning process, rather than just addressing these issues retroactively. This implies, for example, making personal data protection a fundamental aspect of the platform architecture, user interfaces, and data processing activities, including both technical and organizational practices. This approach includes features like data minimization at collection, assessment of the data processing fairness, necessity and proportionality, granular user permissions, transparency in data processing, and transparent privacy policies, among other considerations. We're just working on this, trying to delve into this kind of aspects, how to try to incorporate this vision in this fabric, in this structure that involves different devices, different software, different systems that somewhere are part of this meta structure, And dealing with this kind of consideration right now could be very challenging. We recognize it, but I think that that could be the most adequate way of dealing with this kind of data processing challenges. Other aspect that we need to address in our paper is the how other data provisions containing in other European law provisions in the digital package and on upcoming regulations could impact when dealing with the data processing activities that are taking place in the metaverse. And probably we are going to incorporate all these considerations in the final version of our paper. I think that well, that is the main. That I would say that are the main findings of this study that are work in progress. Well, we are open to wanting to hear all your comments, your provocations, in order to improve this analysis. I'm probably trying to propose not just trying to have a very good assessment of all these problems, but also trying to propose some kind of solutions, or trying to approaches in order to deal in a correct way with this kind of challenges. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Pablo. Thanks a lot for the detailed explanation of the content of the report. I have to admit that I started taking notes, saying, well, this is quite interesting, I will take note, and then I just leave my pencil on the table because there were so many things that were interesting that I'm looking forward to see the final paper, because there are many aspects that you are dealing that are extremely interesting. Now I will give the floor to our discussants. I don't know who would like to go first. Eleni, Gianclaudio?
Eleni first.
Eleni? Let me remind the attendees that they can participate with the chat. If I remember well, probably you don't see the questions that are made by others, but do not worry. We are reading them, and we will, if we have the time, we will pass those questions to our discussant and our speakers. Please, Eleni, go ahead.
There is already a question in the chat, and I guess
that's correct.
That's to Pablo. Maybe we should ask that to Pablo, because that's a context question, I guess.
The question says, Pablo, if Metaverse is where people can interact with their avatars, how we can distinguish them from video games? Well, it's a good question about the definition of the Metaverse.
It depends on how you are considering some kind of broad concept of Metaverse or a more restricted one, But it depends. I mean, for some authors, video games can be considered as some kind of Metaverse, some way. And it depends the levels. If you consider, the first part of the presentation, all these different features of the metaverses, probably a video game in some circumstances can be qualified as a metaverse. It depends of, I don't know. It depends of some characteristics of this kind of video game. But if you consider again this broad concept of metaverse, most of this very immersive video game experience can be considered as a metaverse. And can be all these preventions, all these considerations, data protection, privacy challenge could be applicable to this kind of devices or software.
I agree with you. In fact, there are examples like Fortnite that are usually used in order to define what the metaverse is. As far as you have gamers that interact in that video game, that can be considered at least a proto-metaverse that we are talking about. So, Eleni, give us your opinion.
First of all,
questions.
Thanks to the authors for this very exciting paper. You have managed to put so much information that was so dense. So similar to Aurelio, when I was reading it, I think I highlighted almost every second sentence. And I'm glad that you gave a presentation that we don't need to summarize. So I will immediately jump into some comments and then some suggestions that I hope can be used as a basis for further discussions. And Gianclaudio, I hope I'm not taking up points that you plan to refer to. So you have a very comprehensive, a very complete, as we saw in the presentation, approach towards issues relating to privacy and data protection. My understanding is that you focus quite a bit on data protection, a bit more than privacy. So there are issues relating to privacy that maybe we would like to discuss today that would hopefully give you some further input when you finalize your paper. So as I was reading this paper, I had the feeling that this is a topic that we have discussed in the past on the occasion of different technologies, different applications. So we had discussions like this, and I think Vagelis will remember. I'm not so sure about Pablo, when we had chats about Second Life and the problems that Second Life was bringing to privacy and the protection of personal data many years ago. But the discussions were not very far from what we see today, also in the analysis that you're making, similar to location-based services, when mobile operators started allowing users to use mobile to use location-based services, tracing of data, profiling. So similar again, social networks, again, very similar. So what I want to say is that this, what Metaverse is presenting us today is not something completely different as very often we may think. It is a new technology, and you manage very well to highlight what are the new characteristics that it has. So I would like to see what can be really novel in the way how we approach Metaverse compared to the way how we have approached previous technologies in relation to data protection issues. So one of the suggestions that you make is you propose data protection by design and by default as one of the principles that we really need to focus on when we design Metaverse systems, applications. There is a big difference between centralized and decentralized models. So again, there at some points, I think it would be very useful. You do it at points, but it would be very useful to see whether we can actually talk about the Metaverse and try to make an analysis of privacy and data protection issues. Probably the privacy issues are the same. The data protection issues can be very different if we talk about a centralized or a decentralized model. And I think this would be nice to, maybe you want to split in your paper the analysis in these two, or in every subsection to highlight what are the differences. You also, as I understand, because you are still developing your arguments, as I understand, you want to impose or you want to suggest a strict respect to the data protection rules that will ensure an effective protection of the rights to privacy and data protection of users. That's the main issue at stake at the moment. So I like that very much, but it makes me think. If you go back 10 years ago, when we were discussing and negotiating the GDPR, there were a lot of voices saying, well, we try to strengthen the rules that we already have in the Data Protection Directive, but will we manage to empower the user? Will we manage to make more meaningful consent? Will we manage to have better enforcement of the rights? So not at the level of imposing fines, where the GDPR is undoubtedly more successful than the DPD. But there were these voices saying, are we actually doing the right thing by just making things stricter? Is this the solution? And that makes me think of the same today. We have the Metaverse. We already have issues. Where does the Metaverse start? Where does it stop? The question already coming from the audience, where does the Metaverse stand in relation to online games, is extremely crucial. Because something that I would really like to welcome you to include in your paper is what about children? It's something that I would really think it's very challenging, because if the Metaverse is realized to a large extent, I mean, of course, the Metaverse, we will see it everywhere, right? But when it comes to gaming, we see that children are the main users. And the problems are huge there. Of course, we have Article 8 of the GDPR that you can use, but and this is something very provocative, something that my colleague Loke Murel has already been arguing. Would it be an idea to prohibit children from accessing the metaverse at all? Will we be able to protect the children from all the dangers and the challenges that the metaverse is creating? You talked about the imbalance of powers, you talked about it in the context of consent, etc. But is it something we have seen the regulator in the law enforcement directive establishing a prohibition on competent authorities, on the law enforcement authorities, to use profiling that is based on sensitive data that leads to discrimination? Something that we don't see in the GDPR. In the law enforcement directive, the regulator said, well, I don't think I can protect the suspects, the victims, they don't know who are the data subjects under the law enforcement directive. So I have a ban of profiling that is based on sensitive data. Should we consider a similar thing when regulating the metaverse? Should we go a bit further than trying to apply the existing rules? And also you focus a lot on profiling, advertising. Do you think that we already have the tools to effectively control the potential excessive processing of personal data that can lead to excessive profiling, that can lead to discrimination, that can lead to a number of other problems? Should we, and again, this is something that Loke Murel is proposing, so I don't want to steal her ideas, but maybe it would be something that you would like to consider. Should we, in general, prohibit online advertising in the metaverse? Would this completely ruin the business models of companies? Does it change when we work with a centralized or a decentralized model? So these are just some of the ideas. I can go on. I mean, you talk about consent and contract as a ground for processing. Would we potentially consider legitimate interest? Would processing in the metaverse pass the balancing test of the GDPR, comparing the legitimate interest of the controller or the third controller compared to the rights and freedoms and interests of the individuals? So these are all issues that maybe it would be interesting to explore. Thank you. I have almost 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Eleni. Gianclaudio, your turn.
Yeah, wait, sorry, I was using the browser and so. Okay, thank you very much. It was, I mean, thank you for inviting me for this interesting paper. It was very comprehensive, so I totally endorse what Eleni was saying, and she already covered many interesting parts, so I will try to be provocative on some points that could expand the discussion. And of course, there are many, many things to say about the metaverse, but I understand that this paper, as also Eleni was noticing, has a strong focus on GDPR and data protection. But of course, GDPR has already so many links with related and bigger topics. So, again, I would not go section by section because I think this is not the spirit of today, but I will do some cherry picking for provocations and also to see if you also feedback for maybe, I don't know, if you plan further versions or, by the way, just a discussion today. So I liked your analysis into the categories of data that on the metaverse can be analyzed. This is a tripartition that was already used by the, I think, World Economic Forum and then many data protection scholars already used this in the past, and it's interesting to do this exercise in the metaverse. Data, or declared data, observed data, and inferred data. For the metaverse, these borderlines are more problematic. So I think the nuances here are very key. And in particular, I would like to focus on the borderline between observed and inferred data in the metaverse. So I will give you a small anecdote. Exactly 1 year ago, I was in Istanbul for the Global Privacy Conference, and my experience there was all related to metaverse and data protection for random reasons. First, because I was asked to moderate the general panel on metaverse, and a discussion there, and this is something that Eleni also raised. The discussion there was a lot on centralization versus decentralization. I think you also mentioned in a slide and in a part of the paper that there is a complexity of actors, and so we should clarify what is the metaverse, because of course we might. So let's say that in the ambitions of Mark Zuckerberg, the day after the scandals of Francis Haugen, because we should say that the metaverse was just conceived as a, how to say, as a curtain to cover the scandal in October of 2 years ago. In that idea, the metaverse should be a place where all other players, like what today are websites, are. So it's like, and Facebook be the general platform. So in that idea is a centralized version of the metaverse where Facebook is the gatekeeper of the whole 3D internet, if I can simplify. But then there were other possibilities for decentralization, right? So we can have the Web3, I think it's called Web3, about sovereignty and decentralization through blockchain, very different and complex technologies that could guarantee a decentralized metaverse. But this would also have problem of accountability, right? Because if you have no gatekeeper, how can you make sure that the rules are respected? And this is connected to a general problem of the metaverse, which is this announced problem of a spaceless place, right? A place that has no borders, no space, and no clear applicable law, because it's already there for social media, right? If I offend someone that is in China, no, maybe China is not a good example because they cannot use Facebook, but if I offend someone that is in Africa, of course, it's difficult to understand what law would apply. And there are international private laws or international criminal law procedures to follow. But in the metaverse, this sense of anonymity and this higher sense of presence creates even more powerful effects. So the offenses that are not just hate speech, but can become physical assault, rape. And these things have already been mitigated ex ante. And this is also data protection related, because of course it's fundamental rights connected to data, to personal data. And when we asked to the vice president of Meta, how would he solve this problem of different legal orders, Rob Sherman said, well, I see it as every room having its own rules, which is interesting, but for lawyers, very problematic. Also very paralegal, so parallel to what is actually the law suggesting. So this is just a very general discussion. Then another part related to that experience is that they were showing this visual whatever for the metaverse, and then they were showing at a panel in the afternoon that actually these visors are privacy enhancing technology driven. How and why? Because so this is a suggestion maybe for the paper. You mentioned sensorial data, and I think the most important things that they will collect is the movement of our eyes. But they say that it's protected by differential privacy and federated learning, because they say, basically, I'm simplifying a lot also because I have no background in computer science, but that the movement of our eye is converted into an algorithm, and they just analyze the algorithm. They don't analyze this real-time data from our eyes. It would be interesting to analyze how this privacy enhancing technology measures privacy by design. I saw you have a section privacy by design that is very interesting, and whether this is enough. Because the risk of these privacy enhancing technologies is that they just escape from the GDPR at all, because they claim that they are anonymous. Still, the effect is that the bigger players will have fewer GDPR rules to respect. This is a common problem that we have for privacy enhancing technologies, right? That we have the bigger players that might use the best technologies to avoid the law, to avoid the application of the law. This was also for third-party cookies, through federated learning, and differential privacy for online behavioral advertising. So this is one thing. Another thing, let me see my notes. Inferred data. What about our, so from our eyes, from our facial expression, our emotion is also, in a way, understandable. And we know there's a big discussion whether emotions can be predicted, can be inferred, etc. But even though this might be pseudoscience, they might claim to know and understand our emotions. And this is much more impactful and powerful than just collecting the data from our emoji or from our social media interaction, sentiment analysis, whatever. But are these sensitive data or not? I think this is a good discussion for GDPR people. There was a whole PhD book by Damian Clifford on whether emotions are sensitive data, and Eleni was part of the PhD committee, I guess, or maybe promoter, I don't remember exactly. Yeah, co-promoter. So this is a discussion that comes back a lot for the metaverse, I guess. So whether these forms of emotion should be considered sensitive data or not, and whether the GDPR is adequate for that. And in general, the mental privacy of data subjects in the metaverse, right? So I wrote this paper some years ago with Marcello Ienca about mental data protection, and we still don't have a clear answer on whether this mental data should be sensitive data or not. I mean, they are in different contexts, etc. Okay, so this was a point that I think might be very interesting. And then I would like to, just to conclude or to develop another point. I think a reference to the data protection impact assessment might be very interesting because, as I was trying to say before, here is not just a problem of data processing, but it's a problem of the impact. The metaverse is extremely more impactful than other forms of digital interaction, because this enhanced the feeling of presence, makes interactions more powerful, but makes also advertisements more powerful. So we are used to OBA, to online behavioral advertising, but imagine to be in an OBA, like to be in the advertisement of cheese, of soap, whatever. Yeah. So to walk in the metaverse and feel around me, you know, this advertisement is kind of meeting some of the mascots or whatever. So it's a better. So the impact on our mental freedom through this extensive data processing might be bigger. So I think this is a topic that DPIA should assess, and the metaverse, whatever it will be, should assess. And then, yes, just to conclude the point, and it mirrors the point that Eleni was making on children. I would like to zoom out on general vulnerable subjects in general and in the metaverse. So some months ago, Dr. Rigotti, Carlotta Rigotti, and I, we launched we sent a report produced with Audrey. So it's Alliance for Universal Digital Rights on vulnerability in the metaverse. It was not about data protection. And I think one of the points that emerged in our research was that actually there is an enhanced dependency on the metaverse. So kids are, of course, more vulnerable, but in general, imagine people with a disability. So the metaverse is a great opportunity for them, Because of course, if you have mobility problems or sensorial problems, the metaverse could be a good opportunity, right? At the same time, this could even exacerbate the existing dependency that we feel on the metaverse. I started today my course in Leiden about fundamental rights in digital technologies, and I always ask the same question to students. How many of you would survive without social media? 3 raised their hand after 59, and I don't think that these 3 people were more free than others. Maybe they were just more myopic than others. And imagine this in a metaverse scenario where we might feel so well in an alternative parallel reality, like Second Life that Eleni was mentioning. And imagine if we, how much we will depend on the decision and on the terms and conditions of Mark Zuckerberg or whatever. So just to say that this brings to the problem of freedom of consent that you very interestingly raised about in the paper about imbalance. But in general, the idea of dependence and vulnerability in the metaverse is enhanced, because it's even re-embodying the disembodiment. You know, and I'm concluding now, there's a big literature on vulnerability and bodies, right? In the metaverse, the digital goes back to body, because if it's a virtual, but it's also very much body. And this is connected to diversity and non-discrimination also, right? So other fundamental rights, because the freedom that I have to have a black avatar instead of a white avatar, to have a transgender avatar rather than a binary avatar, all these things will be dominant, right? And yeah, just to say, this is a big Pandora box. But the paper was already super interesting, and I think one of the first ones to analyze in so details all the aspects. So thank you very much for the opportunity also to learn on it. Thank you.
Okay, guys, what do you have to say?
I can let Pablo have a go first, because I only have one comment and I can give it later. Pablo, is that okay? Because we have not rehearsed this, so Pablo, is that okay with you?
Okay, I can go first. Thank you for the comment. Thank you for this. Your insights are very useful in order to improve this analysis. I mean, this is just a preliminary analysis. This analysis is embedded by our own interest, research topics. In some sense, for example, I'm dealing with a lawful basis for data processing, and well, that's the reason why I'm trying to incorporate this vision regarding consent, the power imbalances, performance of the contract, and I'm dealing in particular with legitimate interest. And we didn't mention in particular the legitimate interest, a local basis for this kind of data processing activities, but for sure we're going to incorporate some kind of analysis on that in the next version. I mean, a couple of things I would like to say. First, I mean, hearing you, I realized that we need to delve into the DSA and the DMA, because metaverse platform providers probably they are gatekeepers, and there are a lot of provisions regarding data governance that are there, and we need to delve into that. You know, there's, for example, in DSA there is restriction on data usage. There is restriction on some kind of targeted advertising, behavioral targeted advertising aimed at minors, or regarding with the processing of special categories of data. We need to delve into that. It's necessary in order to have this broader scope of all the data processing concerns that are involved when dealing with this kind of with the metaverse. And the DMA, obviously, because I don't know, because I mean these platform providers, they are gatekeepers. Many of them could be considered as gatekeepers. Maybe some of them could not be considered as gatekeepers right now, but probably in the future they could consider as gatekeepers. And there is some kind of competition-related issues that we need to address when for example, regarding data accumulation, data reutilization, that we need to delve into that kind of things when dealing with this kind of data processing considerations. Regarding the data protection fundamental rights, for example, the impact assessment. Well, it's a very crucial issue. We need to delve into that too. This is linked to the privacy by design and privacy by default considerations. And we need to put attention to this kind of tools when dealing with this kind of activities, and trying to link this with privacy enhancing technologies. That's very interesting too, because here, it's very interesting because you need to analyze the privacy enhancing technologies and privacy enhancing measures in each of the components of the metaverse. And you will have this broader pictures, because you need to consider the different tools and devices, and then consider the meta structure, the metaverse, And considering this way, it's very difficult to try to delve into all these aspects regarding differential privacy, federated learning, because if one of these components are not incorporating this kind of considerations, probably you're losing, the effectiveness of this kind of measure will be reduced in comparison with this comprehensive, way of dealing with this kind of considerations. Well, finally, regarding children, vulnerable subjects, of course, this is a very interesting aspect that we need to consider. We are trying to take a look on Loki model work of opinions regarding this. We are going to try to delve into regarding the situation of vulnerable people, how to create this kind of, this projection, some way to trying to project a self. You're probably in real life, you are not projecting, for example, that some kind of sexual preferences, but in some way in the metaverse, you're projecting this. I try to link this with your real life. You don't want to disclose this in real life, but you're disclosing this in the virtual environments. Well, there is something there that you need to probably to keep in mind when dealing with this kind of consideration with these kind of things. Regarding emotions, yes, of course, this is a very interesting topic. There is a lot of, okay, we consider the recognition of emotions as some kind of pseudoscience. We need to also address the problem was that, okay, but there is a lot of devices and systems that are trying to recognize emotions. How we are going to deal with that, okay? And the metaverse, because of you're using a lot of devices interconnected that are collecting, a lot of biometric data regarding you, the chances or the temptation in order to move forward regarding this kind of emotions recognition will be more present in this kind of environment. I probably we need to at least trying to dedicate, I don't know, a couple of words to this kind of considerations when in the final version of our paper. Well, a lot of things that what you mentioned, but probably this, we're trying to address in some extent some of these comments or provocations in the final version of papers. Thank you very much. Vagelis, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. It's as Pablo said, it's a lot of comments. We are thankful, both I would say high-level comments on the general approach and case-specific comments on the particular issues, and we are grateful and will definitely incorporate them in our paper. I just want to make only raise one point, in order also to leave some space for discussion with the audience that has already started raising questions. And the point is that, as you both correctly identified, there is a primacy or priority given to data protection. And that was intentionally made so because we were using of course, the whole report is on privacy and data protection, but notwithstanding that, we are using the criterion of personal data, and that can also be useful for distinguishing, as one of our audience asked, with a computer game or with Second Life, as Eleni raised. So only if it is personal data processed in the metaverse, in the sense of relating to an identified or identifiable natural person, then there is, to us at least, a data protection dimension. Otherwise, other fields of law may apply, intellectual property law, I don't know, what competition law, other fields of law, but it will only be privacy, it will only be data protection if personal data are processed within the platform. Therefore, if I decide for myself to create an avatar that has nothing to do with me, but just to play in the game, but there is no personal information of me as myself identified directly or indirectly identifiable to me, then I would say, but of course we can discuss that, that no personal, no GDPR or other personal data protection law applies. Therefore, the whole discussion needs to be taken in some other field of law. And that maybe can distinguish between what types of metaverses are of interest to us and what are not. Maybe it is a useful criterion. That's all I had to say. And yeah, I think Aurelio.
Thanks, Vagelis. I have some comments myself, but I don't know if Eleni or Giancarlo would like to add something, or if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask, because I have the advantage that I have participated in the previous webinars. So I know the content that has been discussed there. And so, for instance, concerning the one question that has been raised by you and also by in the chat, concerning whether the DSA and the DMA should be analyzed, the answer is yes. But it is not for Pablo or Vagelis to do it, because we have already done it in the first paper that we are still drafting it. But for you and for the audience, if you want, you can go to the first webinar we had, where the discussion was whether the DSA and the DMA apply to the metaverse. Just to give a very short answer, it was yes, it applied. We can consider the virtual world platforms as online platforms. Okay, so that is the short answer. Because what it was mentioned in the chat is certainly true, that the metaverses, certainly we have Horizon Worlds, for instance, and we also have Roblox, but we have very small companies that are trying to start a new business in the metaverse. We can even think about Decentraland or the Sandbox. For these metaverses, it might be difficult to comply with the obligation established in the DSA. In fact, I may say that if you go to the website of these platforms, you will see that, to be honest, I have not checked it very, very deeply, but I don't think they comply right now with the European legislation. I don't know where they are domiciled, for instance, just to give you an example. So yes, it is true that it might be difficult for them to comply with it, but it is also a question of probably hiring a good lawyer or thinking that you are acting globally if you are in the metaverse. This connects with the second comment that I would like to raise, that concerns the question of the difficulty to determine the applicable law. Well, in my opinion, that is not the question anymore. In my opinion, the question is, in what situation EU law applies? And that's for data protection and also for privacy. And the problem there might be, in the case of data protection, an overlapping of legal regimes. I mean, because as far as a metaverse is accessible from the European Union or is providing services to residents in the European Union, EU legislation will apply. But at the same time, these guys, if they are established in their countries, they will probably need to comply with the legal regimes of other countries. And the same goes for entities that are in the European Union and wants to offer their metaverses in, let's say, Latin America. This is the problem we have now. Unfortunately, I would say it is impossible just to identify a unique law that is applicable to these metaverses, and even to the disputes, because think about in question concerning privacy. yes, we might have the question in abstracto of what is the law applicable, but in practice, what is going to happen is I'm suing in the European Union, and I want to know if the court is going to apply EU law to this specific case. Like, for instance, we have two cases in the Court of Justice, one involving Facebook that you may remember, about this Austrian politician that I don't remember the surname. I apologize about that. And the third thing that I would like to raise, by the way, the question about the protection of minors, the protection of children is extremely relevant, and we are planning to organize a webinar specifically on that topic. So I will, if you have some recommendations for that webinar, I will love to hear that. But another question that I want to raise, and this is for all of you, is that in the end of the day, the dichotomy between centralized models and decentralized models is essential in terms of regulation. But this is not a specific question of data protection. It also affects the questions like content moderation in the metaverse. And I would also say that this is not a specific issue of the metaverse. I mean, the fact of having centralized and decentralized platforms, we can see that it also happened not in Web3, but in other areas. And this is a very important topic that, in my opinion, the European Union has not yet adopted a decision. This concerns, for instance, Decentraland. Decentraland works as a DAO, as a decentralized autonomous organization, supposedly adopting decisions by voting. I mean, just to give you an example, and probably this is an anecdote, but to adopt decisions concerning content moderation by voting seems to me a little bit complicated. And again, who is responsible behind Decentraland for complying with the data protection regulations or with the DSA? I think this is an essential question that the European Union should be focusing in the near future. I don't know. This is an open question. This is my opinion, but probably you have a different one, and I would like to know it.
Maybe one comment on this, just to break the ice again. It's so you said that the problem of decentralization is not just for, or centralization is not just for the metaverse, and indeed we saw some strong discussion on that for federated platforms. For example, last year, these days, most of us migrated from Twitter to Mastodon, but then, or similar federated platforms. And the discussion was there whether, you know, moving to a platform where you don't have a central accountable controller or a gatekeeper or core service provider, but so many different masters of the house, of different smaller houses, right? Like different networks. And so there is a problem, of course, of usability. That so if people perceive how less effective are decentralized service, since social media are based on network effects, of course, the social media that are slow because based on many different federated managers, will not be successful and will slowly die. I think Mastodon is not as successful as we expected. And the second point is that it's more difficult to regulate because you have so many different policies. And so it's so difficult to enforce the law. It's much easier to enforce the law against Facebook, against Meta, rather than against many different smaller rooms, you know. Okay, this is, I think, something that was already mentioned, but I'm just summarizing the what for me is the real legal discussion on the centralization and decentralization of social media. So this usability and let's say accountability enforcement problem versus, of course, a power imbalance on the other hand, because Meta has this huge problem of competition, power concentration, etc. I don't know if there is a way to solve this just through technology. I think the way should be through the law, and the DMA and the SA might help to reduce their power. So I'm not a great fan of federated platforms anyway, yes, just to say.
Shall we open the floor for questions from the audience? Because the time is almost up, and I think it would be nice to hear if people have questions or issues that you would like to see discussed.
It does not seem to be more questions in the chat, but we have one by Jacopo. Following up to one of Eleni's comments, is it possible to have a brief overview of whether legitimate interest may have a preponderant role in the metaverse? Personal data experts in this case.
I guess this is a question for the authors, and then we can reflect.
Tricky question, very difficult one. It depends on the, I mean, again, it depends on the proposal. Probably if you want to deal with some kind of security issues, fraud prevention, well, eventually legitimate interest could be a valid lawful basis for that kind of proposals. But the point is that determining the specific proposal for which you want to use or want to rely on legitimate interest. It's not just a yes or no answer. It depends on the context. It depends on the proposal. It depends on how you are collecting this data, and probably, I mean, it requires trying to delve into the different interests involved when processing data in metaverse context. You know, you need to consider the position of all the stakeholders, and again, I mean, probably you need a paper for dealing with this kind of lawful basis on the metaverse for trying to answer this kind of question. Probably you just be able to provide some kind of I don't know, some kind of general, you know, opinions, advice regarding how to deal with this kind of topics. But again, it's usually, you know, you see that many data controllers, you know, trying to utilize, you know, the concept as a lawful basis for data person activity taking place in the metaverse. You can see, you know, that the new European Union regulations trying to give more importance to consent in some kind of context, you know. I'm thinking about data spaces, for example, the role of consent regarding the data person activities taking place in the data spaces. But probably yes, there is a room for legitimate interest in order to be considered in certain situations as an adequate lawful basis for data.
Maybe it would be useful if you identify purposes, yeah, for which processing may take place in the metaverse, and do some analysis on concrete cases. Maybe that would be useful. And you have the recent case law of the Court of Justice, where you have reflections on consent, you have reflections on the legitimate interest, etc. You have recitals in the GDPR on advertising. So in general, I think maybe it would be useful for the paper, especially for the legitimate. And as you say, maybe it can be a paper in itself, so you don't want to go so deep. But definitely, it would be interesting to highlight that it is not almost impossible. We shouldn't try to find a legal basis for processing of personal data on the metaverse. We need to make sure that we have a distinction, this depending on the processing operations, the purposes, the data, etc. You have different legal bases that you can rely on. And I think even this as a statement with a couple of examples, that would be very useful for the reader to understand the complexity maybe for this paper, you don't need to actually come up with a final framework, but already trigger this debate. We cannot talk about what is the legal basis in the metaverse. It's the same thing we do with commercial context, in the commercial context for processing of personal data. So it would be very useful to do that, I think.
Just one point. I like the question because it indirectly connects with what has been said about centralized and decentralized, and I think it puts the problem squarely in front of us. Legitimate interest, yes, of course, but whose legitimate interest? And then comes the real question: who is going to set this up? If it's called, and why? Why could anybody set this up? So if it is a private actor, it has to be profit. If it is a non-private actor, then it can't be federated or a government even actor, but then again, it is a legitimate interest of that actor. So because we are talking about something artificially made, something made, it is not found or something we can come up with naturally, there is definitely a legitimate interest of the person, the legal entity that constructed it for some reason. And it is the underlying legitimate interest, it is the why we are here. So it cannot, I think it is most definitely a preponderant role, as Jacopo is asking, for this legitimate interest.
Yeah, and maybe if I can add, you know, this is not the business direction that, for example, Meta is taking. They tried everything. They tried all the legal basis. So they started with a contract, then they went to legitimate interest. Now they are with consent versus a payment of 20 euros for 2 profiles per month, which is huge, unfair, crazy. And I think we will work on this soon. But what I wanted to say is that, yeah, legitimate interest is very slippery, and many data protection authorities already says that social media, in particular OBA-driven, cannot use legitimate interest. The Italian DPA against TikTok, I guess. And I think there was a discussion on that that brought then Meta to. So yes, I think legitimate interest might apply to very few cases, like whether you use the metaverse, if you use the metaverse for, you know, in the workplace or for educational purpose. In that case, you might say that it's also the legitimate interest of the user, right? If you want to do online education through it. But then we know that if more data are collected, as Eleni was saying, for other purposes in that context, for selling you good advertisement during your online courses, you know. So yeah, I think I wouldn't suggest any metaverse developer to go for legitimate interest, but it's a very interesting discussion anyway.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot. I think it's time to close the webinar. I have just shared in the chat a post by a person that some of you know is Javier López Guzmán, that has written about this new policy of Facebook in order to ensure the legality of their services in Instagram and Facebook. The last thing I have to mention is thanks a lot, guys. Eleni, Gianclaudio, Vagelis, Pablo, thanks a lot for participating. Thanks a lot for this 90 minutes that you have spent with us. I know that you are quite busy these days. Thanks a lot. And for the audience, the last thing I have to say is that I invite you to the next webinar of the chair for the responsible development of the metaverse. It will take place on the 14th of November, Tuesday, 14th of November, and we will be talking about content moderation in the metaverse. We have Paul Polanski from Kamiński University in Poland working on a paper on this topic. And again, he's following the structure of our webinar. He's going to present the preliminary conclusion of those papers, and we will have 2 discussants making comments to that paper. I hope you can join us on the 14th of November. Again, guys, thanks a lot. Have a nice evening and see you around in any other conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.